Okay, so I wanted to make a quick video on the ATV here. This is a 2018 little Chinese Tornado, so 250cc, 4-speed, reverse, all that good stuff. Nice little ATV to have fun in, but one of my main concerns when I first purchased this ATV was the chain was super loose. Now normally there's a little spring tensioner that goes on that little stud right there, and it pushes up on the chain from the bottom, which I don't need it right now, or actually my old one kind of fell apart, so I'm waiting on a new one so I can install it. But I was always wondering why there was no tensioner to adjust the chain, mainly because one, it had the little spring tensioner up front, but on most ATVs it has the two bolts down here that you can use to move the differential here, or carrier bearing, whatever you want to call it, and you can adjust the chain that way. This one does have the offset sprocket, so I knew that it was adjustable. I just couldn't figure out why. The manual just said to loosen up these two bolts and adjust chain and tighten back down. We tried that and this thing just wouldn't budge at all, and I figured out why. At first we're like, okay, well, we got two bolts here, there's no bolts underneath at all. Show that there's nothing up underneath besides the two bolts there, and it did have this bolt right here that goes from there to the bottom, and it's basically what the brake caliper adjusts to. So just recently I redid the bearings because whenever it was assembled it didn't come with any grease, so my bearings went bad pretty quickly. Anyway, so my video is just to show on little Chinese ATVs that don't have the adjuster down here on how to properly adjust your chain whenever it starts getting loose. So once I took it apart, I realized what I was doing wrong, and the manual doesn't completely go into it, but here's basically how you do that. So no bolts to adjust chain, just a mechanical tensioner, but that'll only get you so far. Eventually the chain will start coming up loose, and you can see where it was eating at the arm right here. It's a freaking gap right there, so the chain was slapping and cutting away at that metal, which I should probably replace that arm just later. Anyway, so the process will be to remove your caliper, and instead of undoing the bolts down here, got one down here. It's a 13 millimeter and it's a 12-inch nut. I'll slide that back, then you can push it back and slide it out. Or the easier way will be to undo these Allen bolts on top right here, and got the little spacers. Remove those bolts, take the caliper out with the bracket. It goes all the way across. Once you undo that, then you're going to want to loosen up the bolts. I believe they're 14 millimeter on top, same at the bottom. I think these are 13 actually at the bottom. Once you loosen those up, then you're going to loosen up that bolt right there as well, which I believe is the same as these, 14 at the bottom. Now whenever you remove your caliper and the bracket out and you loosen up that bolt, you actually have to slide that bolt completely out of the the rear axle here, and basically once that bolt is out, then you're gonna want to remove this bracket just completely off the rear differential. It'll basically have a groove similar to the ones in here for the rear bolts. It'll be right down here. See if I can show you that. That's kind of hard to see, but there's the bolt in there. It's a little groove for it to go into. Once you remove this bracket completely off, you loosen up those two bolts. Obviously you're gonna have the ATV with the jack stand or something just off the ground, so you can remove or spin the rear tires. Then at that point you can sit there and move the carrier forward or back, and basically get to your desired tension on the chain to where it's not slapping at the bottom of the frame up there, right there. And make sure your tensioner is good. Make sure it's nice and tight down there. Once you adjust it, whether upward or downward, to get the proper slack on the chain, then obviously you're gonna slide this bracket back in place. And the reason why you remove this bracket, you see this black pin inside, it actually comes on the side of that. You see it right there. So if you don't remove that, if you don't remove this bracket off, it's not going to give you much adjustment. It's just kind of slap up or down, and it's going to feel, which is why my mistake, whenever I was trying to turn it, it wouldn't turn because it was getting stuck in that bracket back there. So that's why that needs to come off, so you have adjustment on it. Once you adjust it, chain is nice and tight in order to the proper spec. Then you're going to slide this bracket back in place, put your bolt back in, tighten that down, tighten these two bolts down all the way down. Then you can reinstall your brake calipers and everything, the spacers, Allen hex, whatever, and you should be good to go. Like I said, mine, I'm still missing my little tensioner up there, which is fine. I mean, it's not really still touching the frame up there a little bit, which is why I'm waiting on that part. It's just a little spring tensioner that attaches to this right here, and the wheel goes underneath the chain and keeps it up, so it's not touching the frame up there. So I figured out, I know this video is a little long, but figured I'd help somebody out, because I search YouTube, Google, everything, any specs or anything about this ATV, to see how to adjust that chain. And it wasn't until I had to remove all this to replace the bearings that I realized my mistake of not removing this bracket here to be able to move the carrier bearings forward or backwards to adjust the chain. I just thought that, hey, if I got too much slack up there, it's probably just time to remove the chain. Most people would say, oh, you could just cut out a link and reattach it. Nope, can't do that. You do that, and basically, even if you have like this much slack, you know, or slapping up and down, you take one link out, that chain's not going to go back in, period. You're going to have like 2 link shortage on top, which it makes no sense to me, but that's just what it is. And I know I did it, and it sucks. So hopefully this video will help somebody out. You know, now I'm fixing to move up to the front to replace the front brakes, and that should be it.